Welcome to another episode of AutoMundial.
We pay tribute to Sir Stirling Moss OBE, one of Britain's greatest racing drivers who has sadly passed away. And we have the latest Toyota Supra and the Aston Martin DBS SUPERLEGGERA Volante. All that is still to come. First though,
as the world continues to experience the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, a glimmer of hope shimmers from the virus epicentre. In a promising turn of events, Honda has recently confirmed that limited operations have resumed at its production site in Wuhan, China, where some workers returned to their jobs after a month-long shutdown. The ever-popular CR-V crossover is due to be rolled out of the plant in the near future, as rival Nissan is also reported to be partially recontinuing production in the Hubei province. Big news for a country which stands as the world's largest automotive market. After initial reports of worldwide sales expected to slump by 20%, this news brings about a sense of hope as the global community continues to grapple with coronavirus.
when word of a new Aston Martin reaches us, we immediately stop what we're doing and pay attention. Few brands have such a hold over petrolheads' emotions like Aston, and you only have to look at the brand new DBS SUPERLEGGERA Volante to see why. While the coupe version is a truly beautiful car, removing the roof seems to have added another dimension to the car's dramatic visual appeal. The rear haunches appear even more pronounced, and the bonnet somehow seems even longer. It's achingly good looking then, but Astons usually are. So what are the surprises with the new Volante?
Well, on the face of it, it seems to be business as usual. Under that swooping front end, you'll find Aston's own 5.2-litre twin-turbo V12, delivering a colossal 715 brake horsepower. 0 to 62 takes just 3.6 seconds, and remarkably, the top speed is 211 miles per hour, the same as the coupes. Unusually, Aston has had to make quite a few tweaks to the bodywork to allow for the Volante's performance. The rear spoiler has been altered, and there's a new, deeper side strake which draws more air away from the front wheel arch, reducing lift and giving you a bit more stability when you're approaching the 200 mile per hour mark. However, chopping the roof off an Aston Martin has always led to two things: a great tan and ruined handling. And this is where the DBS hopes to change what we know about Volantes. Plenty of bracing has been added to help compensate for the rigidity lost through the truncated roof. That has been added weight though, and the drop-top DBS tips the scales at a hefty 1.8 tonnes, around 100 kilos more than the regular coupe. Nothing beats the sensation of cruising with the roof down and a rapturous V12 soundtrack, something which Aston Martin is acutely aware of. The noise has been enhanced for the Volante, creating a so-called orchestra of sound. Then there's the vulgar matter of price. No Aston Martin could ever really be considered cheap, but the DBS Volante will tighten the checkbook of even the most affluent playboy, with prices starting at around £225,000.
That's about double the price of one of the best drop-top Grand Tourers on sale, the Bentley Continental GT convertible. 2.5 tonnes of the finest materials you could ever hope to find in a motor car. Next to the Aston, the Bentley appears to be somewhat of a bargain. It's almost as quick, its top speed is 207 miles per hour, and it's only 0.1 seconds slower to 62. Then there's the interior. The Aston's dashboard is fussy and the materials feel slightly low rent in a car this expensive. But step into the Bentley and you'll be hard pushed to find anything that isn't made of wood, leather or knurled aluminium. It's a truly stunning place to be, and a gorgeous blend of modern tech and traditional craftsmanship. It's perhaps a more civilised choice thanks in part to its all-wheel drive system and its less characterful W12 motor. It's more refined, but it lacks the raw drama and noise of the Aston Martin's thrilling V12.
And it's the Bentley's lack of character that prevents it from being the money no-object Grand Tourer. It doesn't have the theatre or the glamour of the DBS. It's a technically brilliant car, but the Aston's flaws are part of its charm. Its price means it'll be more exclusive too, and buyers are unlikely to be too disappointed with the interior when they put their foot down and the incredible engine roars into life. It's not a rational car then, but the best ones never are.
In 2009, electric cars were still few and far between. The Nissan Leaf was still a year away from entering production, while Tesla was making its first strides with the Roadster. But in the world of concept cars, EVs were the next big thing, and we were beginning to hear phrases like urban mobility solutions. But there was one manufacturer that really caught our eye: Audi. Debuting at the German motor show, the E-TRON Frankfurt looked production ready with a sleek blend of R8 and TT styling. It had 309 brake horsepower, and thanks to its all-wheel drive setup, it could hit 62 miles per hour in under 5 seconds. And we only had to wait a few months for the next iteration, the E-TRON Detroit, which, you guessed it, was unveiled at the Detroit Motor Show the following year. This time it was more than just an electric R8. The Detroit car was smaller with its own distinct styling and hinted to Audi's plans to make E-TRON its own sub-brand like S-Line and Quattro. Smaller than a TT of the time, the E-TRON Detroit used a simpler setup than the Frankfurt car, with just 2 electric motors driving the rear wheels only, rather than the all-wheel drive setup as seen previously. The 2 motors were cleverly tuned though, able to operate independently, allowing it to maximise traction when cornering. It wasn't as fast as the bigger Frankfurt car, reaching 62 miles per hour from rest in 5.9 seconds. And it wasn't quick to charge either. These days many EVs can recharge fast enough that you can do it while you wait at the motorway services. But back in 2010, the E-TRON Detroit took 11 hours from empty. But it was still early days for electric cars, and this being a concept, it was as much about the styling as anything else. Like many production Audis of the time, it featured some slightly over-the-top LED lights at the front. They were clever though, using the navigation system to turn in the direction of upcoming corners. The E-TRON name was seen on a few more concepts over the next few years, including an electric R8, but it was in 2015 when we first saw what would go on to become the E-TRON production car that we know today. With EVs now becoming more and more popular and Tesla starting to dominate the market, European manufacturers realised that they were beginning to fall behind the curve. As a result, the E-TRON badge had moved away from flashy sports cars and was now adorning a much more mass-market SUV. The E-TRON Quattro concept was unveiled at the Frankfurt Motor Show with 492 brake horsepower and 310-mile range. As the name suggests, power was sent to all 4 wheels, getting the hefty SUV from 0 to 62 in just 4.6 seconds. Styling-wise, there were plenty of Q7 influences, but many of the design features would go on to see production, including the full-width rear light bar, which is now very on trend. The interior, which at the time was considered to be quite radical, would now not look out of place in any current Audi. Such was the influence of the Quattro concept.
But Audi wasn't quite done with E-TRON concepts. Just before the production car hit the roads in 2018, we were treated to another foreshadowing of what was to come. The E-TRON Sportback concept of 2017 was essentially a coupe version of what we'd seen before. The styling was slightly more radical, but the overall shape was still there, just with the added impracticality of the sloping roofline. And now in 2020, we have two variations of the E-TRON in production. The standard car rivals the likes of the Mercedes EQC and Tesla Model X, while the Sportback follows the standard coupe SUV formula. But while it's great to see Audi continuing with its EV efforts, we'd still love to see something more reminiscent of those early electric concept sports cars. Next, we remember one of the great British racing drivers at one of his favourite races.
Still to come, the new Supra. But first...
With most of this year's motor shows now cancelled due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we're missing our favourite thing about them, the weird and wonderful concept cars.
To that end, we're taking a stroll down memory lane, checking out some of the wackiest creations that we saw in 2010. And they don't come much wackier than the Bufori Mark VI Geneva. Unsurprisingly launched at the Geneva Motor Show, the Mark VI was built to celebrate 80 years of the world's biggest car show, blending modern internals and classic styling. Built in Malaysia, the quirky saloon made use of a 430 horsepower 6.1-litre V8 and was said to hit the 62 miles per hour mark in under 6 seconds. But it wasn't the only luxury concept to hit Geneva that year.
The NLV Quant was first unveiled a year previously as a Koenigsegg, but came back in 2010 updated and wearing NLV branding. But with something called a photovoltaic coating, the surface of the car sent energy to a special lightweight flow accumulator battery. We're not 100% sure what that means either, but we do know it could hit 62 in just over 5 seconds onto a top speed of 171 despite its 1.8-tonne curb weight.
However, there was one concept car in 2010 that really blew us away, the wonderfully mad Sbarro Autobau. We're not quite sure what strange events led to the creation of this Swiss supercar, but we can tell you it used a 500 horsepower Ferrari V12 and was built in honour of Swiss racing driver Freddie Leonard, a 24 Hours of Daytona winner who clearly liked to stand out. This week, motorsport fans worldwide mourned over the loss of Sir Stirling Moss OBE, one of the greatest racing drivers never to have won the World Championship. He was 90. He will be fondly remembered in the motorsport world, and at the 2016 Monaco Historique, Alain de Cadenet sat with Sir Stirling and the car that he drove to victory 3 times on the streets of the Principality.
Sir Stirling, it's 60 years ago to the very day today that you won the Monaco Grand Prix in this particular 250F Maserati. That must be an extraordinary feeling.
Absolutely
sitting
fantastic,
here.
because it was a lovely car. I mean, this car was certainly the nicest handling of all Formula One cars. Really was terrific. And of course, this is an ideal circuit for a car that handles well, because you can drive around here on the throttle. And one thing I do remember, which is a bit unusual, and that is I decided to use only a 4-speed box, although I did have a 5 normally, but I thought the 4 would be better here because there's so many, sharp corners. So yes, it brings back so many memories.
This was your own personal car. You bought it yourself,
Yeah.
and as a privateer, you're up against factory teams. You won the race, and then of course you'd automatically dispose of the car when it was no longer competitive. But today, it's like the crown jewels. This car.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I mean, the Maserati, I must say, this was probably the nicest of all Formula One cars of any type. But having said that, the circuit is so meaningful, and the closest to the public. I mean, we get as close nearly as we are to here now, at certain places.
I think I heard you say once that you even had time whilst you were racing, driving round, to notice a pretty girl perhaps or two in the stands.
Yeah, that was actually going down towards the station, on the left-hand side down there. I can't remember the name of the place now, but there's always a very nice-looking girl down there with pale pink lipstick, I remember.
Monaco has always been, I think, very, very special place for you to come and race, and now just to be here.
I mean, it always is. I mean, Monaco is the greatest short circuit in the world, and the people and the whole atmosphere that's here, you drink it in and really enjoy it so much. Well, the one thing I regret is selling the car. It'd be worth a few million more than I paid for it.
What an extraordinary car driven by an extraordinary man. Because behind the wheel around the streets of Monaco is how we should all remember the great Sir Stirling Moss OBE. There have been countless Japanese performance car legends over the years, the NSX, the Skyline, the RX-7, etc. But few of them strike a chord in the hearts of petrolheads like the iconic Toyota Supra.
While it's been 20-odd years since Toyota last offered a Supra on sale, its time out of the production did little to dent the appeal of the straight-six sports coupe. In fact, various appearances in video games and movies have meant the Supra, in particular the previous A80 generation, has become something of a cult classic. Since the last A80 Supra rolled off the Toyota City production line in 2002, the motoring world has waited with bated breath for a new one. And now, the wait is finally over. This is the all-new Toyota Supra, and boy, does it have some big shoes to fill. It sticks to a similar recipe of turbocharged straight-six up front with drive going to the rear. But gone is that famous 2JZ engine of the old car, with the new model using a 3-litre engine from BMW. You see, unlike previous versions, the new one has been co-engineered with the German manufacturer, sharing its platform with the new Z4. As a result, both the Supra and the top-spec M40i Z4 get roughly the same power, 335 brake horsepower for the Toyota and 340 for the BMW. But has this Euro-Asian fusion diluted the spirit of the Supra? Well, step inside the Toyota and the BMW influence is immediately clear. Much of the interior has been lifted straight from the Z4, thankfully including the infotainment. With no signs of Toyota's woeful system, a lightly modified version of BMW's iDrive is fitted. It's intuitive to use and looks the part. While it's hard to complain about such a high-quality interior, buyers of the new Supra will likely be considering it because of its heritage and the fact that it isn't German. There are plenty of German sports cars at this price point, including the very similar Z4. So it does seem like a shame that the Supra misses out on a tech-filled, button-laden dash that was always a characteristic of Japanese sports cars. It isn't just the cabin that gets the German influence either. The engine is BMW through and through. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but Toyota's straight-sixes of old were joyous engines with a character of their own. The Bavarian unit is typically torquey, smooth and refined, and even quite economical. But it's a constant reminder that the biggest car company in the world is now somehow incapable of building its own. We could talk for hours about the pros